Hello, welcome to the Haunted Storybook. Before we get to the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Story 1. The mist came down like a memory. Thick, wet, clinging to every tree and stone, it swallowed the winding road to Wicklow Hill without sound. Nora pulled her scarf tighter and leaned forward, headlights barely cutting through the curtain of white. Her grandmother's cottage, long abandoned, sat just beyond the rise, tucked into the folds of earth and tangled birch trees. The letter had come 2 weeks ago. No return address. Just 5 words written in a hand she hadn't seen since she was 11. The lantern must stay lit. That was all. And yet, here she was, after years of forgetting the place, of silencing the stories her grandmother used to tell, she'd come back. As the car crawled around a final bend, the trees opened to reveal it, a crooked cottage with a slanted slate roof, chimney smoking, window light glowing gold through the mist. But no one should have been home. Nora parked. The air smelled of peat and something faintly sweet, lavender or lilac, maybe, though none bloomed this late in the season. She approached the house slowly. The porch creaked beneath her boots. A lantern hung beside the door, flickering weakly, flame dancing low, as though barely alive. She reached for the handle. The door swung open before she touched it. Inside stood a man in an old gray coat, his face gaunt, beard salt and pepper, hands clasped before him like a mourner. "You're late," he said softly. Nora blinked. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and gestured toward the back of the house, where a narrow hallway vanished into shadow. "The lantern's dying," he said. "And you're the last one left who remembers how to keep it alive." Then he disappeared down the hall without another word. Nora stepped inside. The door closed behind her. Nora hesitated in the entryway. The door had closed without a latch, without wind. The lamp on the wall beside her buzzed faintly. Its flame glowed with an unnatural golden hue, too warm, too steady, like fire preserved in glass. She called out, "Hello." Silence. Except for the distant creak of floorboards somewhere deeper in the house. She moved cautiously, the floor groaning with each step. Dust coated the corners, but everything else was clean. Not just clean, maintained. A rug freshly beaten. A stack of chopped wood near the fireplace. A kettle steaming gently on the stove in the adjacent kitchen. It was like someone had been waiting. Nora reached the narrow hallway where the man had vanished. But something was wrong. The hallway now turned left, where she remembered only a linen closet and the back wall. No window, no turn. Just blank wallpaper and a coat hook where her grandmother's red shawl had once hung. But now the hallway continued. Lit by oil sconces mounted on the walls, it seemed to stretch longer than the house could possibly allow. Framed photos hung neatly in rows, though the faces were all indistinct. Blurred, smudged, or turned away from the camera. The first door on the right was slightly open. Nora stepped closer. Inside was a study she'd never seen before, floor-to-ceiling shelves, maps pinned to corkboard, and a large wooden desk piled with notes and lantern parts. Drawings. Pages filled with looping cursive. And one phrase, written again and again. "The lantern cannot die. Not here. Not yet." She flipped through a torn notebook. Her grandmother's handwriting. Diagrams of lanterns carved with runes. Instructions about ritual maintenance, about fuel that wasn't just oil, but memory, heat, breath. At the top of one page. "The night road returns if the flame dies." Something thumped above her. Nora froze. Upstairs. Where the attic had always stayed locked. A breath of wind brushed her neck, though no windows were open. And just then, the hallway lantern beside her sputtered, dimmed, then flared again, brighter than before. The light pulsed like a heartbeat. And the house waited. The staircase groaned beneath Nora's weight as she climbed. Each step creaked louder than the last, like the house was protesting, or maybe warning her. At the top was the attic door, just where she remembered it, flush against the low, sloped ceiling. But it was open now. Wide open. And a soft, golden light leaked down through the crack in the floorboards, spilling across her feet. She swallowed hard and climbed the last few steps. The attic was larger than she remembered, taller, deeper, as if the roof had been lifted and stretched. Wooden beams arched overhead like ribs. A single lantern hung from a rafter, glowing dimly. Beneath it sat a rocking chair, still slowly moving. And in the chair was a shape covered in an old quilt. It rose and fell slightly, like it was breathing. Nora froze in the doorway. "Hello." The chair creaked once. The shape stirred. A hand, thin, liver-spotted, familiar, pulled back the quilt just enough to reveal a face she hadn't seen in almost 20 years. Her grandmother. Paler. Hollow-eyed. But her smile was unmistakable. "Nora," she rasped, as though the word tasted strange. "You came back in time. I thought you were dead." Her grandmother nodded. "I am. But not gone." Nora's eyes filled with tears. The woman patted the space beside her. "Sit." Nora did, sinking to the attic floor, arms wrapped around her knees. They sat in silence for a moment, the lantern above them flickering gently. "You were the only one who ever listened," her grandmother said. "Even as a girl, you understood things didn't end when the lights went out." "I don't understand what's happening," Nora whispered. "You will," she said. "But not yet. The lantern must stay lit, or the night road returns. It's been circling for years, looking for a way back." Nora stared at the lantern. "It's just a light." Her grandmother shook her head. "It's a memory. A promise. A ward. And now, it's your turn to tend it." Something shifted beneath the floorboards. A sound like fingernails dragging across old wood. Her grandmother went still. "It knows you're here." A soft knock came from below. 3 taps. Then silence. "Don't let it in, Nora," she said, voice low and sharp now. "No matter what it says. No matter whose voice it uses." The rocking chair creaked again. And the lantern overhead began to dim. The attic lantern flickered. Nora stood slowly, eyes on the hatch at the top of the stairs, heart thudding in time with each pulse of the failing light. 3 knocks. Soft. Measured. Familiar. Her grandmother didn't speak, but her face had changed, tight, alert, a flicker of fear behind the eyes. It was the first time Nora had seen her afraid of anything. "It sounds like my mother," Nora whispered. The knocking came again. Only this time, a voice followed. "Nora," it said. Her mother's voice, soft and warm and choked with tears. "Sweetheart, are you up there? Please, open the door." Her chest tightened. Her mother had died 5 years ago. Cancer. She'd sat beside the hospital bed. Held her hand. Buried her. So how could she be standing at the bottom of the stairs? The voice came again, a little louder. "Nora, it's me. I'm sorry for everything. Just open the door, darling. I don't want to be out here anymore." Her hand drifted toward the attic hatch handle. Her grandmother's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Don't you dare." Nora snapped back. The old woman stood now, arms trembling but fierce. "It isn't her. It never is." Nora stepped back. "But how does it sound so real?" "Because it watched her. The night road sees everything we bury. It waits outside houses like this. It whispers to children and knocks like loved ones. It only needs one thing." Nora said it aloud. "An open door." The lantern above them flared bright for just a moment, so bright it filled the whole attic in golden firelight, and then shrank again, as if wind had passed through it. The knocking stopped. Silence returned. But it was a tight, expectant silence, like the house itself was holding its breath. Nora looked back toward her grandmother. How do I stop it? The woman turned toward the darkest corner of the attic, where a small, heavy trapdoor lay under layers of dust. You feed the flame. With what? Her grandmother looked back, face grim. With the truth. Then the trapdoor began to breathe, a slow rise and fall, like something sleeping just beneath the boards. Nora knelt beside the trapdoor, heart hammering against her ribs. It shouldn't be breathing. The boards rose and fell ever so slightly, like lungs beneath a blanket of dust. Warm air seeped from the cracks, carrying with it a strange scent, not rot, not soil, but old flowers. Wilted petals. Funeral lilies. Her grandmother crouched beside her. The night road is below. It comes through when we forget. When we lie. When the lantern dies. Nora reached out but hesitated. What happens if I open it? Then it wakes. They sat in silence, save for the shallow breathing of the trapdoor and the faint sound of wind outside, though the windows were sealed. Nora whispered, "You said I had to feed the flame." With truth. What truth? Her grandmother reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a matchbox, small, wooden, worn smooth. Every lantern has a memory at its center, she said, placing it in Nora's hands. Yours is still buried. But it's here. Nora stared at the box. Carved into its lid, in neat cursive letters. Nora, age 8, do not open. A cold sweat prickled across her neck. She remembered it now, barely. A wooden box she had hidden after her 8th birthday. A summer she had never talked about again. The same summer she stopped visiting Wicklow Hill. She opened the box. Inside, wrapped in crumbling tissue paper, was a photograph. A boy's face. Pale, freckled, smiling. His name hit her like a stone, Julian. Her childhood best friend. She hadn't thought of him in years. Because she'd buried the memory. She remembered the pond now. The red scarf. The thin layer of ice, just starting to freeze over. Julian, running ahead of her. Laughing. Slipping. Falling through. She had run. Not for help, but home. Too afraid to go back. Too afraid to tell. She never told anyone. And no one ever found him. The trapdoor exhaled sharply. Nora's eyes filled with tears. It was my fault, she whispered. The lantern flared to life. A golden blaze roared up inside it, chasing every shadow from the attic. The trapdoor shrieked, not with hinges or wood, but like something old and angry, scorched by the heat of the truth. The board stopped moving. The breathing ceased. And the silence returned. Her grandmother nodded once. The flame remembers, she said gently. Now so must you. Nora didn't move. She sat in the center of the attic, the matchbox clutched in her hands, the lantern casting long shadows around her. And downstairs. The knocking began again. But this time, it was Julian's voice. Nora. The voice was muffled through the floorboards, but unmistakable. Julian. The same voice that used to call to her from the field behind the cottage. The one that dared her to race through the woods barefoot, or climb the rusted windmill at the edge of the orchard. Now it was calling up from beneath the attic. It's cold, he said. I've been waiting so long. Nora gripped the photograph tighter. Her knuckles turned white. Don't answer it, her grandmother said from across the attic, though her voice was quieter now. Fainter. Truth weakens it, but if you listen too long, it learns your fear. Nora stood slowly, her legs trembling. The lantern overhead flickered, Not like before, not out of weakness, but as if pulsing with awareness. "Julian," she whispered. "I'm still down here," the voice said. "You left me in the cold." "Why did you leave me, Nora?" She pressed the photograph against her chest. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." The voice softened. "But I'm still here. Right under the boards. Let me up. Please." The trapdoor shuddered. A single plank began to splinter down the middle. From beneath it, something wet began to seep, clear water, slow and steady, like the melt of old ice. Nora stepped back, breath quickening. "Don't let it talk," her grandmother warned again, weaker still. "It's not him. It's a mouth. A hollow. It feeds on the names we whisper in the dark." Nora looked at her. "Why did it take his voice?" "Because you buried him with your silence. The night road wears what we forget." The water on the floor shimmered with reflection. Nora glanced down. Her own face stared back at her. But it blinked first. She stumbled backward, the lantern's flame flickering violently as a cold wind curled around the edges of the trapdoor. The voice changed again, no longer Julian, but her own. "I'm still here," it said. "Down below. I never left." "You did." A noise like fingernails scraped along the underside of the trapdoor. Nora knelt beside the lantern. She held the photo over its flame. "I remember him now," she whispered. "I remember it all." And she dropped it into the fire. The photograph curled instantly, blackening, the boy's smile vanishing in a plume of smoke. The flame shot up. And the voice screamed. Not Julian's. Not hers. Something far deeper. Older. The floor went still. The trapdoor darkened. The water dried in an instant. And the attic fell silent. Behind her, her grandmother smiled faintly. One memory down. 1,000 to go. The next morning, if it was morning at all, the sky outside the attic window glowed a pale shade of gray, neither dawn nor dusk. Time seemed to twist in the Wicklow house, like it had no interest in obeying the sun anymore. Nora sat beside the lantern, legs folded beneath her, the air warm from the night's final burn. The photograph was gone, ashes lost somewhere in the wick. Her grandmother sat opposite, fading at the edges like an old dream. The flame holds fast, she murmured. That was the first truth. But the night road runs deep, child. It doesn't stop at memory. It follows what we forget, and what we try not to feel. Nora rubbed her hands together. You said there are more. Her grandmother nodded slowly. You left behind many lights. Pieces of yourself. But there's one below, where we buried the old well. The well. A shiver ran up her spine. She hadn't thought of the well in years. It's been sealed, Nora whispered. Sealed by stone, her grandmother replied, but not by silence. With effort, she stood and handed Nora a rusted brass lantern, different from the others. Older. Its glass was smoky, its frame dented with time, but inside it flickered the softest, most fragile flame Nora had ever seen. Take this one with you. It's from before your birth. It remembers the dark long before you could name it. Nora took the lantern, cradling it with reverence. Downstairs, the house moaned. Not the creak of old wood. A deep, guttural sound, like something beneath the foundation had just shifted. A sound of turning earth. The night road is thinning, her grandmother said quietly. And the well remembers everything we dropped into it. Nora stepped toward the stairs. As she descended, the house darkened. The hallway narrowed. Wallpaper faded. The scent of smoke gave way to damp moss and cold clay. She reached the back door. Beyond it lay the old garden, overgrown with thorn and ivy, and at its far edge, just beneath a crooked apple tree, the well waited. Chained shut with rusted links. Padlocked. But the wood creaked as she approached, and the chain gave a little, as if eager to fall away. She held up the lantern. Its flame shivered. Then burned brighter. The well breathed. Nora crouched beside the well, the lantern casting ripples of amber light across the stones. The padlock, once thick with rust, seemed newer now, gleaming faintly as if it had been placed only hours ago. But she hadn't touched it. "Do you remember what you dropped?" her grandmother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "It wasn't just coins and wishes, child. It was something more." She reached forward, fingers trembling, and touched the chain. It felt warm. Alive. With a brittle click, the lock opened and tumbled to the dirt without protest. The chain loosened and slipped down the stone mouth of the well like a snake shedding its skin. The wooden cover groaned as she pushed it aside. The darkness beneath was absolute. Not empty, hungry. Nora held the lantern high, and the light pierced the first few feet of shadow, but no more. From the depths came a voice. Small. High. Familiar. "Nora, you said you'd come back." Her throat tightened. She remembered now. The doll. Handmade. Lopsided smile. Button eyes. She'd made it the summer her parents had started fighting. She named it Clem. Carried it everywhere. Until the night her mother threw it across the room during an argument. It tore. The stuffing scattered. Nora, heartbroken and ashamed, had taken it outside and dropped it into the well. "I thought if I got rid of it," she whispered, "the noise would stop." But it didn't, the voice from the well replied. "You just made room for other things." A cold wind curled from the well's mouth. The ground around her pulsed once, like the earth itself was listening. Then something rose from the dark. Not a figure. A shape. Child-sized. Wrapped in burlap and threadbare cotton. Two buttons stared up from the shadow, faintly glowing. Clem. But not a doll anymore. It moved with wet, creaking joints. It breathed. "You left me alone in the dark," it said in a voice that matched hers at age 9. Nora took a step back, the lantern's flame flickering wildly. "You forgot what I was for. I held your secrets. I listened when no one else did." "You were just a toy," she said. "No," it said calmly. "I was the part of you that remembered what it felt like to be small and afraid." It climbed slowly out of the well, not crawling, not floating, just appearing, as though it had never really left. Nora held the lantern close. "I remember now." Clem stopped. The buttons dimmed. "Do you forgive me?" she asked. "Do you forgive yourself?" the doll replied. The flame surged. Clem began to unravel, threads unwinding like smoke in wind, the body collapsing into a pile of old cloth and memory. All that remained was a single silver button, lying quietly on the stone rim of the well. Nora reached out, picked it up, and tucked it into her pocket. The well groaned. Then sighed. And the darkness receded like a tide. The wind followed Nora back to the house. Leaves scattered around her boots. The lantern in her hand pulsed with a softer, steadier glow than before. The button in her pocket felt warm, alive somehow, as if it still remembered the fear it once held. When she stepped over the threshold, the cottage shifted again. The air changed. No longer just musty and old, but damp. Like stone underground. Like soil pressed into lungs. And then she noticed it, a crack in the kitchen floorboards. Thin, straight, and new. It hadn't been there yesterday. "The house is remembering," her grandmother's voice whispered behind her. "You've stirred old breath. Now it exhales." Nora knelt beside the crack. From it came a soft hum. Low. Throaty. Something alive below. She pushed aside the rug, revealing the old cellar hatch. It hadn't been opened since before she was born. No latch. Just a ring of iron, blackened with age. She pulled it open. Dust erupted. Cold air billowed up like fog. Wooden steps vanished into a pit of shadow. The lantern flickered, but didn't go out. It seemed to know this place. With one last breath, Nora descended. Each step creaked like a rib breaking under weight. The air smelled of wet iron, burnt sugar, and something deeper, something fungal and sweetly spoiled. She reached the bottom. The cellar stretched wider than it should. The walls were lined with shelves, jars of old preserves, unlabeled bottles, rusted tools. In the center stood a wooden table covered in melted wax, broken keys, scraps of parchment. And on the far wall, a mirror. Tall. Unframed. Its surface rippling like water in wind. Nora moved closer. In the glass, her reflection didn't match her movement. It was slower. Watching her. Smiling. Then, the reflection spoke. "You've been here before, you know." Nora's blood chilled. "No. I haven't." The reflection tilted its head, eyes wide with something hungry. "You came when you were 5. You cried at the top of the stairs. You asked them to stop yelling. They didn't hear you. So you came down here. And the mirror offered you silence." The memory hit her like a wave. Small hands. A trembling voice. The need for quiet. The mirror's surface, soft and liquid. And the promise it made. "I'll take the noise away, little one. I'll keep you safe in the quiet." She had touched it. And forgotten. "You left part of yourself here," the reflection said. "The quiet part. The obedient part. The one that didn't ask questions." Nora stepped back, heart racing. "That part of you is mine now," the reflection hissed. "Unless you take it back." She raised the lantern. Its flame roared. The mirror shattered. Glass exploded in every direction, but no sound followed. Only stillness. And in the shards on the ground, she saw dozens of faces, hers, at every age, staring up at her in silence. The flame flickered. And then, peace. Something in her chest unlocked. Something she didn't know she'd lost. She turned from the broken mirror, lantern glowing steady in her hand. Behind her, the cellar sighed. Another breath, released. Nora climbed the stairs slowly, each step lighter than the last, as if the house itself was exhaling relief. The silence behind her was no longer heavy with threat, but quiet with release. When she reached the kitchen, the crack in the floor had faded, as if it had never been. The house seemed to settle, its ancient bones easing into rest. Her grandmother's presence, faint but warm, lingered nearby. "You've done what you came to do," she whispered softly. "The lantern will burn as long as you remember to feed it, with truth, with courage, with love." Nora looked down at the lantern in her hands, its flame steady and golden, no longer flickering in fear but glowing with quiet strength. She tucked the silver button from Clem's unraveling safely into her pocket, a token of the past made whole. Outside, the mist thinned, retreating from the hills and trees. Dawn painted the sky with pale pink and gold. For the first time in years, Nora felt a tether to this place, not one of fear or forgotten pain, but of belonging and memory held safe. She turned to the door, ready to leave the house behind but carrying its light with her. Because some stories never end, they live in the flame, passed down from hand to hand, from heart to heart, always burning, always guarding the night road from returning. And Nora knew now that she would keep the lantern lit, no matter what came. The night was over. The dawn had come. She stepped into the morning light. Story 2. The village of Hollow's End was a place folded into shadow, a narrow stretch of land where the trees seemed too tall, the sky too gray, and the air thick with a cold that seeped into bones. For generations, the townsfolk whispered about the hollow, a deep, ancient sinkhole nestled beyond the last cluster of cottages, where no child dared play and no traveler wished to wander. Evelyn had returned after 15 years, summoned by a letter with the same faded ink and shaky handwriting she recognized instantly, her father's. He'd vanished without a trace a month ago, leaving the village stirred with rumors. Some said he'd been taken by the hollow, swallowed whole by the earth's hungry mouth. Others whispered darker things, about voices beneath the ground that called to those who listened. Evelyn stepped off the old bus, her boots crunching on the cracked pavement. The sky hung heavy with low clouds, the kind that promised rain but never delivered. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the village center, the wind weaving a chilling tune through the crooked rooftops. The pub, the only place still open this late, hummed with murmurs. Evelyn pushed open the heavy door, and the warmth inside wrapped around her like a blanket. Faces turned, curious, wary. The barkeep, an old man with eyes like chipped flint, nodded silently. "Looking for your father?" he asked, voice gravelly. Evelyn swallowed. "Yes." He disappeared near the hollow. The barkeep's gaze darkened. "Few come back from there." She ignored the warning and left, walking toward the edge of the village where the trees began to claw at the sky. The hollow yawned before her, an abyss rimmed with gnarled roots and whispered stories. She dropped a stone in. It fell, then fell again. A faint, echoing whisper drifted upward, unintelligible yet chilling. Night fell swiftly. Evelyn pitched her tent at the forest's edge, but sleep would not come. From the darkness came the faintest calls, half voices, half winds, beckoning her down. Drawn by a force she did not understand, Evelyn slipped from her tent and moved toward the hollow. The earth beneath her feet trembled as the whispers grew louder, swirling into words just out of reach. She reached the rim and peered into the blackness. "Evelyn." Her breath caught. The voice was clear, soft, mournful, familiar. "Help me." The voice pulled her down the rocky slope, past twisted roots and shattered stones. The ground opened like a maw beneath her feet. She fell, weightless, until she landed on cold, damp earth in a cavern lit by phosphorescent fungi that cast ghostly glows across walls etched with symbols ancient as time. In the depths, she found her father, eyes wide, but alive. He reached for her, but the ground beneath him pulsed and shifted. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. The cavern trembled. From the shadows emerged figures, shadowy, shifting forms with faces like cracks in glass, voices like the wind through dead leaves. "They feed on memory," her father said. "They live in forgotten things. They want to take you, too." Evelyn gripped his hand, feeling the cold spread from their joined fingers. "You must remember," he urged. "Remember who you are." She closed her eyes, reaching deep inside herself for every fragment of her past, her childhood laughter, her mother's lullaby, her first steps. The cavern filled with light, pushing back the shadows. The creatures screamed, their forms unraveling into nothingness. The ground stilled. Together, they climbed back toward the surface. The hollow sealed behind them, silence swallowing the echoes. As dawn broke over Hollow's End, Evelyn knew the darkness had not disappeared, it had simply been remembered. The village breathed again, but the hollow waited. And the whispers beneath it never truly stopped. Evelyn scrambled up the rocky slope, dragging her father behind her as the cavern seemed to pulse and shudder beneath their feet. The shadowy forms writhed, voices rising into a cacophony of desperate wails, trying to pull them back into the darkness. "Hold on," her father gasped, each word a struggle. "Don't let the memories slip." Her fingers tightened around his. She could feel cold seeping into her bones, but she summoned every scrap of her past, the smell of fresh bread from her mother's kitchen, the sun warming her face on summer afternoons, the sound of her father's laughter before the silence fell. The shadows screamed and clawed, but the light from her memory grew brighter, a beacon pushing through the gloom. As their hands touched the rim of the hollow, Evelyn felt the earth tilt, threatening to swallow them whole once more. With a final heave, they pulled themselves free, collapsing onto the damp grass under a sky thick with stars. Her father coughed, shivering but alive. They won't forget," he said, voice hoarse. "The hollow feeds on the forgotten." Evelyn nodded. "Then we remember." In the days that followed, Evelyn and her father spoke with the villagers, urging them to share stories, to hold tight to memories long buried in silence. Around fires and in quiet rooms, they told tales of lost loves, forgotten joys, and whispered fears. The darkness around Hollow's End seemed to recede with every story spoken aloud. But Evelyn knew the truth: beneath the earth, in the silent hollow, the shadows waited patiently. They did not vanish, they simply listened for the silence that would welcome them home again. One evening, as Evelyn sat on the edge of the village, watching the mist roll in, a faint voice brushed her ear, soft, like the rustle of dead leaves. "Remember me." She shivered but smiled, clutching her father's hand. "We remember." The night was long, but the village held its breath, and its memories. Because sometimes, the darkest places aren't those beneath the earth. They're the ones we forget to hold on to. Story 3. The town of Willow Creek was forgotten by maps and time, a speck of dust on the edges of civilization, where the river wound slow and the willows bowed like mourners. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the Hollow Man, a shadow that lived in the marshes, waiting for those who strayed too close to the water's edge. Mara had never believed in such stories. A city girl through and through, she came to Willow Creek only because her late aunt had left her a small cabin near the creek, nestled among the gnarled trees and reeds. The first night was quiet but uneasy. The house creaked with the wind, the thin floorboards groaning beneath her feet. Outside, the willows whispered secrets only the night could understand. She sat by the window, notebook in hand, hoping to finish the book she'd been struggling to write. But the silence pressed in, thick as fog. At midnight, the sound began. A soft tapping on the windowpane. Mara froze, breath shallow. She turned to look, but only saw the wavering silhouette of the willow branches, bending in the breeze. The tapping grew louder, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Then a voice, barely a whisper, floated through the glass. "Mara." Her heart jumped. She hadn't told a soul she was here. The voice came again, urgent, pleading. "Help me." She pulled the curtain aside. No one was there. Only the dark, and the river, reflecting moonlight in shifting silver ripples. She told herself it was the wind, or her mind playing tricks. But sleep was elusive after that. Over the next days, strange things happened. Footprints in the mud by the creek, too large for any animal. A shadow in the corner of her eye, disappearing when she turned. One evening, Mara followed the sound of whispering voices into the marsh. The willows bent low, their branches brushing her face like cold fingers. The air smelled of decay and wet earth. A figure stood near the water's edge. Tall. Thin. His face was hollow, a void beneath a hooded cloak. His eyes, two black pits, stared at her. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice like rustling leaves. Mara swallowed. Who are you?" "The Hollow Man," he said. "Keeper of forgotten things. The lost. The betrayed." Her skin prickled. "You're a ghost." He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "No. Worse. I am the memory of those cast aside. The things buried beneath the mud and lies. Why call me? Because you hear. You see. And because you carry the last piece." "The last piece?" He extended a bony hand. In it, a rusted locket glinted faintly. Mara's heart raced. She recognized it. It had belonged to her aunt, the one who left her the cabin. The Hollow Man's voice dropped. She never left. She gave herself to the marsh. Bound by secrets, chained by silence. Mara clutched the locket, cold and heavy. "Can I help her?" He shook his head. "No one frees the hollow willingly. But you can remember. You can tell. You can bear the weight." A chill wind swept through the willows. Mara stood alone as the figure faded into mist. Back at the cabin, she sat by the fire and opened the locket. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her aunt, smiling but eyes shadowed with fear. And beneath it, a note. "Tell them the truth, or the hollow takes us all." Mara began to write. Words poured from her, stories of loss, betrayal, and the darkness that waits in forgotten places. Outside, the willows whispered. But this time, she listened. Mara's fingers trembled as she set down her pen. The fire crackled beside her, casting flickering shadows that danced like ghosts across the cabin walls. She held the locket tightly, its cold weight grounding her. The note's warning echoed in her mind, "Tell them the truth, or the hollow takes us all." She thought of her aunt, her laughter now silenced, her smile trapped in a fading photograph. The secrets buried beneath the marshlands, kept alive by shadows and silence. That night, Mara stepped outside, the moonlight pale and fragile. The willows swayed gently, their branches scratching against the sky like skeletal fingers. From the edge of the creek, a whisper drifted, soft, coaxing. "Tell them." Her breath misted in the cold air as she walked toward the marsh, the locket warm against her palm. The hollow man waited, his hollow eyes fixed on her. "I'm ready," she said. He nodded slowly. "The marsh remembers every lie told in its name. Every secret hidden beneath its waters. Your aunt was one such secret." Mara's heart clenched. She tried to escape. To silence the darkness. But the hollow does not forgive. "Then I'll tell," Mara said, voice steady despite the chill crawling up her spine. She began to speak, words that carried across the still water, stories of betrayal, pain, and forgotten promises. She spoke of the town's unspoken sins, of the lives lost and the lies told to cover them. The marsh rippled. From the water's depths, figures emerged, faces half-formed, eyes empty, reaching out. They were the forgotten, the silenced, the souls bound to the hollow man's mercy. But Mara did not flee. She stood firm, the locket shining like a beacon. With every truth spoken aloud, the faces became clearer, the shadows lighter. Her aunt's smile softened. The hollow man's form shimmered, less shadow, more substance. When dawn cracked the sky with a pale glow, the marsh stilled. The hollow man spoke once more. "You have freed more than her. You've given voice to the silence. But remember, Mara, the hollow waits for the forgotten. Never stop telling." He stepped back into the mist, dissolving into morning light. Mara returned to the cabin, the locket now warm with life. She knew her stories would bring the town to reckon with its past. Some would resist. Some would deny. But the hollow had taught her that truth was the only light that could keep the darkness at bay. And so, she wrote on.